See some folks already rolling in. Obviously, we're going to give it a few more minutes to the actual webinar start. So hang tight while we wait for more folks to show up and for 1 Central, 2 Eastern to hit. All right, for folks who are already here, we're probably going to give it to like 2 after before we officially kick off. But thanks for those of you that were early and on time for being here. Anna, I don't know if we have a poll ready, but while we got folks waiting for another minute or two, if we could kick that kicked off, that'd be great. Awesome. We'll give it 1 more minute. For those of you that are also joining, um, should be a poll. Appreciating the answer there. We got a lot of responses so far, which is helpful for me as we kind of kick off this discussion. If you didn't notice, there should be a poll on your screen asking what level of automation do you currently have in your FinOps processes? Spoiler alert before we end the poll, we've got a lot of folks who say some and some that say none, but nobody's saying a lot yet, which is good. That's kind of what the backbone of what we're here to talk about today. So I'm going to give it just 1 more minute here as I see folks are still joining, and then we'll get it kicked off. All right, awesome. I promised 2 after, so I'll try to hold my end of the bargain. So I'm going to end poll, and I think I can share results here. So thanks for those that I think that worked. Thanks for those of you who participated in that and kind of giving me a good gauge and frame of reference of where folks are coming to us. Every org is a little bit different, right? And where they're at in their FinOps processes. And so this kind of helps me level set where we're at today. So let's do this. Trying to get this poll off my screen. Awesome. Um, I am assuming everyone can see my screen. Folks at Kion, tell me if something has gone terribly wrong, but awesome. Thanks everybody for being here. So my name's Tatum Tummins. I'm a senior product manager here at Kion. And to do a quick intro on both myself and Kion, if you're not familiar with us, so we're a cloud operations platform. We focus on kind of all aspects of managing your cloud, everything from FinOps and spend reporting and trying to optimize your spend to compliance remediation and identity and access and kind of do a full suite across the board there. As for me, prior to coming to Kion, I was a practitioner myself for well over 7 years at a healthcare company. I like to say I grew up in FinOps, and I'm sure many of you on this call right now probably were doing FinOps before it was ever a term and something people talked about. And then the foundation came out in 2019, and next thing you knew, I knew what to call my job and what I was doing for a living. So I've been a part of the journey, right, from when we were all figuring out how to even get visibility into spend to where we're at today, where we're talking about FinOps for AI and automation and all these really exciting things. And so I share that because the perspective that I'm bringing today, it comes from both sides. It's both as a previous practitioner and user of tools and homegrown, tools as well, myself, as well as, on the product and vendor side, meeting customers, meeting prospects, meeting folks at trade shows, and even FinOps X here in a couple weeks, and hearing the challenges that they have. And that's ultimately what drove the topic that we're going to dive in today, which is all about ROI and doing more with less to maximize cloud efficiency. And so to break down how we're going to tackle this, if I can get my screen to move here, awesome. So agenda, it's short, but we got a lot of content to cover. We're going to start with just an overview of how to do more with less. I'm going to set the stage of kind of some of the prerequisite things that I think it takes to do that and get started. And then we'll jump into more of the actual playbook content. For the sake of time today, we're going to talk about two areas. We've promised in the abstract here that we're going to follow up with some additional content for folks afterwards. But today we're going to talk about two areas. One, that's what I would call traditional FinOps, but hopefully with a different spin that gets folks thinking about different ways to think about waste. And the other one might be new to some of you folks that are in FinOps, but haven't really thought about other ways and other processes that you could get value from your cloud. And so we'll talk about account provisioning, and we're actually going to do a live demo of what that looks like and the impact it can have on organizations. Then we'll end with some next steps, and then I'm going to do one slide on what's going on with Kion, what releases we have coming out, and what exciting stuff we're working on. And then I'm going to do my best to leave at least 10 minutes of Q&A if folks have any questions or want to provide feedback at the end. So that's the game plan, and I appreciate everybody that's here and ready to learn and engage and have a discussion. So let's start with breaking down this concept of doing more with less. And so I mentioned it at the top, but this webinar topic was driven by you all, customers, prospects, people I meet. You're constantly sharing challenges that you're facing at your organizations to do more and often with less. And with that, what I also found very interesting and what kind of solidified this as the topic for the webinar is I'm also hearing a lot of folks share that their struggle to show the value that their teams are giving to the organization. And so I think I wanted to spend some time here to talk about, this idea and the importance of measuring the value that you're driving and maybe some ways to creatively think about what that ROI that you're bringing your organization can look like beyond just dollars and cents. The other thing I would say before we get too deep into this, and I forget to say this, the idea of today isn't a playbook on how to do FinOps. There's a lot of really good content out there by people smarter than me, right, that have written on a lot of the how to do FinOps, how to get a practice off the ground. What today is really focused on, it's a playbook about how to approach things a little bit differently, how to approach them in a way that we think is important for sustainability and efficiency long term. And my goal is just that all of you come to this webinar in different places in your organization. Some of you much more mature than others. And my goal and success for me today looks like giving you just something that you can take back to your organization that might be net new in terms of how you think about value and efficiency. And so with that set up, let's talk a little bit about the challenges. So I alluded to it at the top, but you're being asked to do more. And what does more mean? It means save a little bit more money. It means manage more and scale faster in the cloud. And for engineers, it means develop faster, right? How do we get to the market faster? How do we test our new solutions and products? And how do we do everything more and more and faster? And when you think about what you're being asked to do it with less, a lot of times it's less resources and people. It's less time, and a lot of folks we're hearing are having challenges with, budget constraints to get the tools that they need to drive this efficiencies. The thing that I would also highlight that I find really interesting, and this kind of leads to that measurement piece I talked about at the beginning, but too often I feel like folks in leadership are still focusing just on the dollar and cents of what their cloud is spending. And they're not talking about the value that they're getting or could be getting from their cloud. And so to me, it became obvious that help is needed for you all to create more value and that you also need better ways to measure it. And so we're going to talk a lot about value and things of that nature. I threw some examples on the screen. This is not exhaustive, right? But when you think about what the cloud is doing for your organization and ways that you can make it more efficient, right? These are all just examples of things that contribute to how valuable your cloud is, right? Are you using your people better? Are you getting to market faster? Are your customers happy? Are you reducing your risk and security incidents? Are you making decisions a little bit faster? And then all the while, are you saving a little bit more money and eliminating waste? And so when you think about this as the setup, we'll start with the high level before we get into the actual playbook, because I think this is an important piece to level set on. For those of you that are familiar with Kion, you've probably seen this slide or this messaging before. About a year ago is when we started, or I started to share a little bit about my perspective on the future of FinOps and why I think cloud ops is such an important part of that. And to explain what I mean, um, FinOps for a long time has been focused on, what I will call the more traditional FinOps, right? The reporting, the saving money, the optimizations. And what we're seeing in the market and what our customers and our prospects are sharing is that that's not enough to keep up, right? There's a level of automation and governance that's required. And we think when you look at organizations, there are folks that are really suited to collaborate more with FinOps teams. And so I like to think about this as people talk about shifting left, right, in an organization in terms of making decisions. This is taking all the folks it takes to make decisions earlier, right, more proactively, and putting them with the same common goal, same common processes to ultimately drive more ROI for the organization. And so to put some specific language around, well, what does this collaboration look like? Well, when you think about, in my mind, how FinOps and CloudOps come together to ignite efficiencies, the first thing that I would call your attention to is when you think about the high level FinOps phases, you've got inform, optimize, and operate. And I'd argue that the operate phase has almost been the forgotten phase for the last several years. Folks have spent a lot of time maturing their practices and doing really great work to get better visibility, better chargeback, better rate optimization strategies. But when you think about what's supposed to take place in the operate phase, it's all about continuous improvement. How do we create processes that are sustainable, scalable? How do we put governance around what we're doing? And how do we automate it? And when you think about the folks in your organization that are really suited to drive that policy, governance, and automate your processes, a lot of times they look like cloud ops. And I should have said this at the beginning, but when I use that term at cloud ops, it could be called a lot of different things. You could be thinking about DevOps at your organization. You could just be thinking about your broader engineering teams, or maybe you have a FinOps engineering team specifically. But these are the folks that specialize in automation. That's how I'd ask that you frame it. And so moving on, the other thing, and I've alluded to this, is that when you're looking at automation, you're not just thinking about spend, you're also thinking about process. And so the more that you can automate, the more that folks are spending manual time, remediating and working on tasks, and the more time they have to add value elsewhere. And the last piece I would highlight is you're helping eliminate risk. If you think about what security professionals have been doing for years now, right? They approach their work as let's prevent as much as possible. If we can't prevent it, let's detect it as fast as possible. And once we detect it, how do we remediate it? We have to apply the same process to FinOps when we think about our spend and our processes. How can we prevent as much as possible to protect both our cloud from a security standpoint, but also our budgets, right? Anomalies, runaway spend. We have to start to think about that. And I think that's where the future of FinOps is headed. So before I get into the specific playbook content, as I continue to tease out the rest of this presentation, um, when you think about collaboration, what I'm really talking about are two words. I'm talking about policy and automation. And so we're going to spend the rest of the presentation today diving into what this looks like. But at a high level, the goal is to automate as much as possible, to reduce manual touch points, create consistency, and just speed up your processes. And also establishing that governance and that FinOps policy to potentially prevent waste before it exists, or at least make finding and remediating on that waste a little bit faster. and ultimately make decisions easier. And then the last piece that we'll talk about is that how do you baseline your current processes and how do you start to actually measure the impact that you're giving the organization? Some of the areas that we won't have time to cover are listed here. And this is not an exhaustive list of all the things and all the areas that you can focus on. But the first half is talking about more of your traditional FinOps efforts, right? Automating your spend reporting, automating on anomaly detection, and even automating your rate optimization. But what I'm going to challenge you all today to do is to think about new ways that you can invest time into and new ways of creating value at your organization. And so the two asterisks you see on the screen are where we're going to spend our time today, account provisioning and proactive waste governance. And then you can expect kind of a follow-up in terms of the materials that we'll send out after the webinar that cover additional areas. And so my last preamble piece of this that I will say is kind of my thesis statement for today um, is that organizations that take the time to invest proactively into both policy and automation will see an increase in their cloud ROI. And I'm excited to show you some of the ways that we've proven that with our own customers here in just a couple slides. So with that, let's move into the first part of the playbook and talk about eliminating waste. One of the reasons I picked this as a topic for today is because it's something we all generally understand, right? We all know that cloud waste exists in some form or fashion at every organization, some more than others. And it's a constant challenge, right? Waste looks like a lot of things. It can be an idle instance, or it can also be just a really bad process that takes a lot of time. Um, but I wanted to start here because it's something we're familiar with, but I hopefully am going to bring in maybe a new perspective or ways of thinking about that, of how you could combat waste at your organization. So to start, just a quick overview of when we think about automating waste or putting policy around waste, I'm simply saying identifying and removing wasted cloud spend with financial policies and proactive guardrails where possible. When you think about the people involved to make this happen, you've got cloud ops, who we've already mentioned. These folks are often responsible for actually implementing the automation to make this happen. You've got FinOps, who, in my mind, own the details, right? These are the folks that are coming up with the policies of how you want to define what a wasted instance looks like or what a right sizing opportunity really should look like for your organization. And they collaborate with stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, I mean engineering, finance, leadership. And these are the folks that help influence what these policies ultimately are. But that at the end of the day, FinOps owns the policies and CloudOps actually help make them a reality. And when you think about, okay, well, how do you measure, what's the ROI here? Some of it might be obvious, right? When you think about what's the impact, there's clearly a cost savings, right? Anytime you're able to act on wasted spend, you've reduced your cloud bill. I think we're all aware of that one. But then you also think about indirect labor savings. So if the folks in your organization spend less time trying to find an opportunity, less time trying to decide is it something that they can act on, and then ultimately less time having to actually manually remediate it, you're giving people valuable time back to go add more value to your organization. And the other piece that I don't know is always obvious to folks is that long-term cost avoidance. We did a webinar on waste a few months ago where I illustrated this a little bit further, but this idea of you can prevent something before it ever exists, the long-term impact that has when you don't allow something to linger for weeks or a month and you delete it right away, the impact that ultimately has, where you're not just saving money, you're actually preventing that waste from ever existing. And so these are just some high level areas when you think about how you measure this. But let's talk about the fun stuff, which is like, what does automation look like? What are the key levers that I can pull to improve this process in my organization? And the first I'm going to start with might be surprising to you because it's not on the surface deleting waste or removing wasted spend, but it's around tagging automation. So the reason I start here is because one of the biggest problems with taking action in an organization is that constant chase of, well, who owns this, right? How do I find the right person to review this and make a decision? One of the ways you can do that is actually by making sure that your tagging is automated. And what I mean by that is simply saying, hey, these are the key value pairs that we expect to exist on this account or this part of the organization. And you do that by tooling or internal scripting. There's a couple of options that you have. And ultimately, what you do by increasing your tagging coverage automatically is you find those owners a little bit faster. You also create consistent processes. So on the slide, I referenced chargeback, right? But if you think about building a really mature chargeback process at your organization that's dependent on tagging a lot of times, if you don't have, an engineer accidentally transposing a number or someone just forgetting to tag something entirely, if you eliminate that part of your process, well, now you have a more efficient chargeback process that obviously has a big impact on your organization and your finance team and your accounting folks. And so there's a lot here, but to show a quick example of what this can look like. So one is what it might look like in a tool like Kion. So this is just a simple screenshot of a feature we have called custom variables. What you're looking at on the screen is me simply saying, hey, for this particular account, there's no reason a resource shouldn't have a cost center tag with the value that's expected and an owner tag with my name. But another way you could do this, agnostic of a tool, is to use something open source or another type of scripting language like Cloud Custodian. So what's on the screen here is just an example of a Cloud Custodian policy that's saying, hey, if you find an EBS volume that doesn't have these three tags, kick off this workflow, send this notification, or take this action. And so those are just some examples. We can provide more details of other options you have. But this is what tagging automation looks like. And there are folks who are right now taking advantage of features like this and seeing real ROI benefit from it. And so to kind of keep moving forward, I've mentioned policy probably one too many times already in this presentation, and I'm probably going to say it again, but financial policies, and there's two parts to this when you think about automating it. The first actually is an automation. It is the painstaking part of defining what waste means to your organization. And this means actually writing things down, getting buy-in, getting agreement from your stakeholders, right? And defining this is what an idle instance means to us. This is what a right-sizing opportunity means to us. This is what an unused account or an unused instance looks like to us. This is what a life cycle policy looks like. The list can go on and on and on. I threw a couple of examples up there of an idle SageMaker instance or just some simple business hours start and stop language. But you have to define what waste is. And once you've made that definition, you can actually create processes generate action-driven processes to actually act upon that waste. And so this is immediate cost savings. It's quicker decisions. It's also that cost avoidance I just alluded to. To show another cloud custodian example, this is one we actually use. So in the Kion hosting environment, we have this policy. I hope it's somewhat okay to read, but to walk you through it, start at the top. It's saying every time there's an unattached EBS volume for 7 days, take a snapshot of that. And if it doesn't have the key value Kion preserve, go ahead and automatically delete it. And this is just an example of the type of automation that we use or that our customers or people out in the market are using and getting really creative. These can be really expansive and really detailed to your use case, but just want to show this as an example for today. And so to continue moving on, the last piece that I want to talk about automating um, is actually communication. So this idea of how folks receive information in your organization, making that an automated process has a huge benefit in terms of just actually getting the right information to the right folks. And so if you think about this in reality, if you have an anomaly pop up in your cloud environment, the moment it takes someone to actually find to review that to ultimately take action, if you can reduce that even by just a couple of hours, you're potentially saving your company significant money and you're creating real value. And so this can look like a lot of things. Two quick examples is just automating, workflows where a webhook is kicking off a Teams or a Slack notification to the right folks, or maybe it's creating a ticket in ServiceNow or Jira and assigning it to the right folks automatically based on the tagging that's on it or the account that's on it. And so there's a lot of ways that it can look like, but I want to call that out as it's often overlooked, right? Folks are focused on a process to find waste, but they're not focused on the process of actually getting it to the right people to make the right decisions. And so as I kind of round out this eliminating waste section, when you think about what are next steps for folks, if you found any of this interesting, the first piece is high level strategy and execution. So number one is the first step for every area of the playbook and anything that I'll talk about, which is you have to decide what your strategy is for automation. Whether that's an external third-party tool, whether you want to build it yourself, or whether it's a mixture of both. As a company, you have to decide what your plan is. For eliminating waste specifically, then you have to start with actually the creation of those financial policies I talk about, and collaborate with a broader org to put them in place. And then for that third bullet, when you think about executing, these are high level. But when you think about if I'm going to invest time in automation to help eliminate waste, I think there are three questions that your goal should be to eliminate from the vocabulary of your organization. You should never ask who owns it, right? You've got automation in place and you've got the right setup to know through tagging or maybe it's other mechanisms who actually owns this resource, this potential waste. The next question, is it actually waste, right? You can refer back to those policies and that governance that you've put in place. And the third kind of ties back to the governance policies as well, but can we act, right? Having guidelines and getting this information to the right people at the right time helps inform and make that decision a little bit quicker. Um, I won't go through all the measurement examples. We'll include these in the ROI calculator that we send out at the end of this. But just threw some examples up there of how we've seen folks start to measure this at their organization. Some of it's obvious or related to savings and cost avoidance, but even things like just measuring how long does it take to detect and resolve an anomaly is something that's really important to start measuring. And so to round this out with just a kind of quick case study example, we have a customer who using kind of proactive guardrails, and there's a couple of examples that they specifically use. Some of it's just start and stop, idle instances, things of that nature. They're trending towards $1 million in annual savings, just putting some parameters around their spend, especially in lower environments where it's much easier and safer to just take automated action without any manual intervention. And the last piece, on the surface, you might think increasing your tagging coverage by more than 20% automatically is not an initial ROI gain, but I promise you it is, right? With what I was just talking through around time to detect or more consistent chargeback processes, there's a lot of value you gain by just automating that and not having someone like myself in a prior life spending a week sometimes trying to figure out who owns something. And so those are just a couple examples of the impact this can have on your organization. Um, and I think I'm doing okay on my time. They like to joke here at Kion that I yap too much, but I think I'm doing all right today in terms of pace. I'll try to stay on track. So um, that leads me to my next area of the playbook, and it's account provisioning. And I did this for a reason, which is that it's something that a lot of FinOps folks have never thought about. It's not a part of your processes today. For our cloud ops leaders that I see here on the call today, this is obviously a part of your workflow and part of your day to day. But I wanted to bring this up because I want to challenge my what I'll say traditional FinOps folks on the call that have never been exposed to account provisioning and what its impact is on your organization as a process, to maybe leave here and think a little bit differently about ways that you could go about improving this at your organization. So with that, when I say account provisioning, what am I talking about? I'm simply saying creating and deploying new accounts as timely as possible with the right baselines and the access for engineers to begin development. And when you think about the people involved, similar to last time, CloudOps is ultimately responsible for automating a lot of these workflows and actually making these processes automated. But there's a lot of folks who are a part of this, right? If you think about your InfoSec or security teams, they're typically involved in the creation of the workflows, especially from a requirements standpoint for your organization. And then FinOps, right? They are a user of this workflow, or at least should be. And I'm going to talk about and show exactly why that is. But FinOps folks at your organization need the visibility into this workflow to know when an account is being created, what its purpose is, so that they ultimately can start to establish some financial policy, like we just talked about, on these accounts from the moment they exist. And so when you think about ROI impact, there's cost savings both to reducing the amount of just manual labor it takes to actually provision a new account and potentially preventing wasted spend because you're putting in the right financial policies from day one. Then there's an accelerate revenue. So I'm going to share this in the case study here shortly, but we've got customers who are actually measuring that they're able to get access to engineers faster and get to market potentially faster because there's no dead time waiting for a new account. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And the last piece is reducing risk. And so this idea of if my accounts have proper baselines, I'm reducing the risk both from a security compliance standpoint, but I'm also reducing the risk of an anomaly or a cost overrun existing. One of the things I would also highlight here is around AI governance. So obviously, everyone's talking about AI and what they're doing with it, what they're testing with it. And so one of the ways that we've seen this really impact folks in the market is being able to provision a new AI sandbox account or a dev account with the right guardrails reduces risk from engineers using a machine type that they shouldn't be using, or even using the most expensive GPU that's available on the market. There's a lot of examples that we've seen. So, with that set up, let's go into key levers for automation. And so, the first, and I'm not going to spend too much time actually on this slide because I'm going to show you how it works live. But the first thing that I would highlight around the levers you have for automating is actually around that intake process. So when someone needs an account, the ability to go make that request and automate the approvals that are needed for that account is an area that you can invest in automation. And then there's the actual account vending, right? So think of this as automatically vending this account with the right baselines and the right access for folks. Um, One of the things besides just time and consistency that I would highlight here is by automating some of these processes, there's also a reduced benefit of not having over provisioned access. Um, One of the ways that I will share that ties into FinOps, this is a real story. I was pretty new to all things cloud spend in my prior life, and we actually found where an engineer was buying savings plans that nobody knew about because they were given a role that nobody realized had access to go make purchases in AWS in the marketplace and with savings plans. And so, what is a FinOps issue to deal with? Ultimately happened because of identity, right, an access issue. And so the account vending process can also clean up parts of that so that you're not left with the manual headache that I was left with. Um, and then the last piece, there's that word again, financial policies. So by having FinOps be a part of this process and having these policies that you can automate as part of your account creation, you're ensuring things like tagging, guardrails, budgets, whatever it may be in terms of your FinOps processes are automated from day one, and you're potentially preventing waste from ever existing in this account by how you define your policies and governance. So now let's get to the fun part, and I'm going to take a drink of water as I continue to yap here. I'm going to leave PowerPoint and I'm going to show you how tools can make this possible. So, um, what you will see here is for those of you that have never seen Kion, I'm inside Kion here. The only thing that I have done before right now is navigate to this accounts tab. And so what I'm going to highlight for you all right now is what automation can really look like and the power of it, specifically to account automation. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and I'm going to say that I want to create a new account. I'm going to create an AWS account for today. We're going to go commercial. I do have the option of creating a bunch of accounts at once. We're not going to overwhelm the demo with that. We're going to start with just one account. Um, and then all I'm doing here is saying which payer, so which billing account in AWS should this align to. In this demo environment, we just have the one. So this sandbox management account. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to name my account. And for the sake of today, we're going to say this webinar is awesome, since that's what you're all thinking right now. So I'm going to name the account this. Kyan's going to automatically know that's what the account's supposed to be named. And I'm going to add it to a project. I'll touch on what a project is in just one moment, but a project is an entity in Kyan specifically. And I'm going to add it to my AI research sandbox. And I'm going to say that I want it to start in May. And I'm going to hit go. And so what's going to happen here is you'll see for this moment, the account is inaccessible. I'm going to buy myself about 90 seconds because that's all I hope that I need to show you how awesome some things that are happening in the background are. While that's happening, I'm going to come over here and actually show you a diagram of what's happening. So if you think about the account workflow, right, one of the things that's not pictured here is that intake process, which we talked about as being an automation lever. But for now, let's assume through ServiceNow, someone has requested that they need an account and it's kicked off that approval workflow automatically. And as those approvals come in, those APIs that you see on the screen that are being kicked off are what's happening right now as I present. And so in one way, it's worried about access and user provisioning. So who needs access to this account? What roles do they need? What kind of access do they need? And then the other API is kicking off some native Kion functionality around actually creating that account and putting in some of those financial policies that I've been referring to. And so this slide's a little overwhelming, but we'll share it out. But this is an overview of all the stuff that's happening right now in the background. And this is everything from compliance and security baselines to those financial policies that I've been talking about. And so what you're going to see in a moment is that there are financial triggers that are on this account to make sure that if a spend meets a certain threshold, right, I receive an alert or an action is taken. You're going to see that a budget already exists on this account. And you're going to see a lot of other cloud rules and things that have been deployed that make this account ready to use for folks and also protected from a financial standpoint. And so I'm hoping if the magic of a live demo works here, let's see. Oh, so I'm looking at my accounts. Oh, maybe I need to search for it. Sorry. This cloud. Oh no. Let's see. Where's my backup support here? I promise
Yeah,
this.
go to the project and refresh, and your magic is in place.
All right. I would say I promise this worked this morning all. Um, okay, are we here now? Awesome. There it is. Okay. So what I did is I navigated to that project that you saw me assign it to. Um, and so you now see I have this account called This Webinar is Awesome. Before I show you even cooler stuff that has happened, I'll give you kind of an overview of what's going on within Kion automatically. Is because I've put this account on this project, it naturally gets a few things. So you're going to see some financial enforcements that are automatically applied to this account. So think of these as just things related to budget triggers or how much am I spending and is there anything I need to be alerted on from a spend standpoint. There's also a ton of account baselines. So one of the things I call your attention to is because this is in our AI sandbox account and we have a Kion AI jumpstart that automatically gets applied that has some AI governance built in. So that the moment this account gets spun up, it's protected from anything that you want it to be protected from how users might use Bedrock or other services from AWS. And lots of other really cool things in here around like just monitoring backups and snapshots and other types of custom saving opportunity checks that are unique to this project and this account. And so just to show, right, sorry, let me go here. There's a budget already set up here and some labels. So think of these as like metadata that you could use for chargeback or to create actual actions. So what I want to do now is I'm going to actually federate into this account to show you that it really exists. And it's not that it just exists as the really cool part, but to show you the power of what's going on with automation, I'm gonna go to CloudFormation, and what you should see is that there are already things getting fired off in this account. It's existed for about 3 minutes at this point, and these policies and these things that are just showing you that Kion was saying were on this account are actually already getting deployed and are on the account. And so any sort of custom compliance checks or things that you might have in terms of trying to automate your waste would also get naturally deployed as a part of this account getting vended and put into Kion. So I find that really cool. I hope you all found it also somewhat interesting. Let's jump back to the PowerPoint. And what I'd like to do now is to talk about, well, what does that mean if it's not obvious? And so there's the strategy and execution piece, which for time's sake, I think I'm going to jump over. And then there's some ways you can think about measuring this. But when you think about impact, and we're seeing this with our customers, I actually think some of these estimates we're probably being too conservative ourselves in terms of the impact that we're seeing that this process has, right? If you're able to take what is a manual, tedious account provisioning process, and let's ignore the financial governance for a second and just take that process. If you can automate it, you're creating real labor savings and potentially reducing the amount of time that an entire resource or multiple resources are spending to make this possible. And the second thing is you're making it such an automated process that engineers are able to begin work right away. I remember a story where we hired a VP of blockchain several years ago, and it took her team 6 weeks to get the account set up because there were so many services that they needed to use that were new we weren't used to, and we didn't have baselines and templates ready to be sent out. And they waited for 6 weeks to begin their work. This is automating that so that those engineers could actually begin their work immediately, potentially same day. And so we could dive into a lot of other examples that we've seen around the impact this has. But the other piece that I would talk about is when I mentioned earlier around a customer saving $1 million in proactive waste elimination. Think about this as that waste governance exists from the moment that this account gets provisioned. And I think that's really powerful. And I hope folks can kind of connect those dots of how, if you put together this automated process where your workflows are connected and FinOps and CloudOps and InfoSec are working together, what you can really accomplish in terms of a value and an efficiency standpoint. So, with that, let's talk about next steps. So there's a couple prerequisite considerations that you all have to decide that are individual to each organization. The first I've alluded to earlier, but it's this idea of what's your investment strategy. You've got to decide what that is for you, and you've got to commit to it. You can excuse my double negative on the screen, but I would argue you can't afford to do neither of these. You have to build or buy. Um, if you're not investing in automation and at least rethinking how your processes could be creating more value, I promise your competitors are in the market. We see it every day. Folks are doing really innovative things around automation, protecting their financials, automating how they even buy savings plans and commitments, whether that's homegrown or through tooling. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening with automation right now. And I hope today at least has you rethinking what that could look like for you and maybe what your strategies are. The last piece I would say too is do an analysis of this, right? Take the calculator that we're going to send out after this and put in, the cost of labor at your organization, the amount of hours it would take for you to build this, and compare that to quotes that you're getting from tools that you're interested in or tools that you're using today to figure out what the right strategy is for you. Um, the second piece kind of goes back to the beginning of the presentation, but you have to align your CloudOps and FinOps teams. They really do complement each other into the ability to really gain efficiency because they each have different strengths. And I would encourage you to rethink what's possible, right? And be open to experimentation. Don't think about just the normal FinOps processes that you have today. Think about everything it takes to manage your cloud estate and your infrastructure and all the processes you have and have that lens, right? Because you can create real impactful value if you broaden your scope. And the last piece there is part of this alignment. There's that word again, policy creation. But I ask that you really consider what that looks like at your organization and spend some time creating those policies because ultimately the idea of proactive automation is an ROI accelerant to the moon. And so if you can prevent waste before it exists or prevent inefficiencies before they exist, you're going to see a real impact. And so the last piece is don't worry about boiling the ocean overnight. Start small and then scale. Identify a single account or a single team to pilot some automation with. Assess where you need the most help, right? Where you think you're the most inefficient or where you really need support. And then measure it, right? Baseline how your processes play out today, the value you're getting or not getting. And then after you put in some sort of new process or new automation, measure that improvement and what you feel like you're getting from it over 60, 90 days. And I feel confident you're going to see results of some sort. So when you talk about support coming out of this, obviously myself, just as a practitioner here, I'm interested in learning from folks and their challenges. So you can think of me as support, but specifically, we're going to do two things. We're going to send out a playbook. So this is just going to be a PDF overview of some areas to consider, some automation levers, and we'll look a little bit similar to some of the content you saw today, just across some additional areas. And so we'll also share some case studies and potential impacts and ways to think about that. Um, and then we'll have the ROI calculator. So this is just an Excel template that tries to help folks get started with baselining. What do our current processes look like? Where are we inefficient? What value are we missing? And if we put in some automation, what would that look like, right? What's the value we could expect from it? And so we'll send those out over the coming weeks to folks to hopefully use as a guide and a template to just get started at your organization. And so, next steps for you all. So, for everyone here, I hope that you align on those initial considerations we just ran through as kind of your first steps. And then review the templates that we're going to send out. Hopefully, there's something in there that's helpful in terms of how you want to rethink what this looks like at your organization. And then the last part, if Kion's new to you and something was interesting today, you can scan that QR code right now on the screen and request a demo or just request to talk to us and share kind of what you're struggling with and what you're looking to solve. And even if we're not the tool for you, we can at least kind of share some strategies that we've seen work really well for others. And then for Kion customers, continue taking advantage of Kion's CloudOps features, maximizing efficiencies. If you feel like there's a feature you're not taking advantage of enough and you want to learn more about what that can mean for you, provide that feedback to us, right? Whether it's to me directly or with your delivery and support contact. But let us know how we can continue to either advance features or help you utilize them a little bit better. And then I'm going to quickly summarize the key points today. So these are the high level takeaways. If you remember nothing that I said, try to remember these four things. So the first is to achieve efficiencies, organizations must integrate FinOps and CloudOps processes via automation. You must rethink what's possible, where to invest your time, and measure your outcomes. And I'll pause here just for a second and just say, when I say rethink what's possible, that's what I'm referring to when I say rethink the processes that are not providing you the value that they should today, that could be more efficient, expand your scope to all the things that it takes to manage your cloud, and figure out where your time is best invested. Folks that do that and organizations that do that will increase their cloud ROI by investing in that policy and automation. And my challenge for you, and you can hold me accountable to this. I hope I hear from folks 90 days from now that maybe are operating a little bit differently. But my challenge to you is to use this content, some of the ideas that I've shared today, and just reassess at least one process, even if it's tiny, right? Reassess at least one process that's manual for you today. Commit to some sort of workflow, automation, whatever it may be, and invest in it, measure it, and let me know if you find success. I'm confident that you will. And so that ends the playbook part of the presentation today. I am going to do one slide before we get to Q&A on kind of what we're up to, what's new and next for us. And so the first thing is that we have a release coming out, hopefully end of next week, if not the first week of June, is currently the plan. But 313, and I say this confidently, is probably my favorite release since I've been at Kion. The depth and breadth of what we're bringing with this to our customers, I'm so excited about. You can kind of see it already in some of the imagery that's on the slide, right? But for current Kind customers, I think you're going to be blown away with the new dashboard experience. There's a lot going on there, in addition to just like making the ability to get your like saved reports and resize and customize everything unique to each user. There's a lot of stuff there. There's a lot of things around quick cloud access, having a better default roles for folks to use. So a lot in the usability section. I'm excited for folks to see it and give us feedback and help us even take it further. We're also introducing billing rules to Kion, which is just a better way to handle your custom pricing needs that I know a lot of you have. And then we're giving some love to enforcements. There's still more love that I hope to give over the rest of this year, but we're going to make enforcements a little bit more timely, a little more granular, and then we're also adding the ability to customize some of those email messages that get sent out to users. Um, Last piece to touch on is just kind of more of our compliance and identity access realm. But we have better compliance defaults now. We've heard your feedback that having everything out of the box listed as a medium, right, and having customers come and have to set those. We've taken an opinionated approach on an out of the box way to view compliance severities, so that hopefully it's a little easier for folks to get value from right away. And then we're also going to introduce a resource access report. So this is a detailed report of roles and users that have access to specific resources. And to actually tie that back to my presentation today, this idea of how an identity problem can become, a FinOps problem, having detail on what users and roles can even spin up a certain instance, having that detail and then being able to tie it to a potential anomaly or things of that nature is a really powerful tool. So we're looking for feedback on where else folks want to take that. And so please share that as you get exposure to 313. Last piece, oh, wrong direction. Last piece of what's up next for us, we're going to improve forecasting. We need to do an overhaul and make that a much more powerful engine for our customers. And so we're excited to do that both from a back-end standpoint, but also just visually what it's doing in our spin reports for folks. We're going to introduce this idea of dynamic accounts for folks that are kind customers. you're kind of used to the org chart structure and how the account structure needs to be set up. We want to make that a little bit more flexible so that if you want to bring in third-party spend into Kion, that's easy to do. If you want to break apart those accounts into multiple sub-accounts and still fit within the org chart structure, we're going to try to make that a little bit more possible. Um, and then the last piece, I think we changed the name of this morning, but too late for edits. But Cloud Rules Dashboard for Kind customers. I think a lot of you know what this is and have been asking for it for a long time. But making kind of how those cloud rules are getting deployed to accounts a little bit more visual and easy to manage. And then the last piece is kind of an AI chatbot. So we're still working through the details of what functionality this is going to provide users. We're going to provide plenty of updates as we kind of decide where we're going to lean into and kind of that first exposure of AI in Kion and what it's going to be able to do. We have a lot of data as part of our platform, right? And we want to be able to take advantage of all of it, whether it's FinOps data, compliance data, identity data, and provide something that's useful for folks and maybe speeds up some of your decisions and processes. So with that, I've officially yapped as much as I needed to on this. We'll do some Q&A. I don't know if questions came up. I couldn't see the chat during um, that. So let me pull up. Okay. All right. Well, I do see Randy yelling at me that the account was there and I just missed it. So thanks for that. Um, do we have, let's see, is there any Q&A that I'm missing, folks? And if you do have questions, please feel free to submit. Okay, I see we have one that was answered around the recording. There will be a recording. We will share that out. Um, I think that'll actually be the first thing that we share out. And then some of those additional materials I talked about will be coming a little bit later after we share the initial recording. We'll give folks a few more minutes if there's any questions. If not, I hope that's because I answered all of them in the presentation. But if not, if you think of something after this, feel free to follow up. For the folks we still do have on the call, Anna, I think I had one more poll that I was hoping to get feedback from folks, if you don't mind launching that. And if you don't have questions, feel free to answer that survey and head out. But I appreciate all of you for being here that attended, and I hope you found something valuable today. Awesome. I appreciate these responses. Um, oh, is there questions I'm missing, Ebes? I see.
Yeah, there's a question. Does this
Yeah.
toolset have an ability to report on AWS cloud usage that is connected to a purchase order tied to a marketplace private offer?
Yeah, so John, I'm gonna make some assumptions on that question around like, are you trying to actually see, for example, like Datadog spend or actually report on that spend at like a service level in Kion? If that is your question, that's part of the thing I was just talking about that we're going to be releasing up next in terms of, yep, okay, great, yeah. So we already are a focus compliant tool in terms of like we know how to use focus, read focus. We're currently building in kind of more of a workflow structure so that folks can actually take, their third-party tool spend, tell Kion where to look and how to pull that in terms of an account workflow and bringing that in. But yeah, we've actually already piloted that with a few customers and have had success with actually integrating that into our spend reports. Yeah, so then I see a question about FedRAMP. So Kion's actually self-hosted. So I guess I think I'm speaking correctly, and somebody can speak up if I'm wording this wrong. But because we're self-hosted, right, the FedRAMP requirements don't actually apply to us because you own Kion. You own the data. We actually have no access. Once you install Kion, it's yours. And so that's one of the reasons when you think about the access that we have and some of the actions that we're able to take, some of the reasons that our customers are able to do that with us specifically is because we're not a SaaS offering and they own the data and they kind of own the workflows and automation that they're building themselves. And it's not something that we even have access to. So, um, account creation capability of using a reseller. Ebes, I might need you to speak to that one because you probably have more experience with it.
Yeah, sure. I actually don't see that on my side. Do you mind just reading off the question?
Yeah, it's asking if we've had any issues with account creation when using a reseller.
Okay, yeah, great question. In fact, I think we've actually helped customers enable that even more so than they could previously. So going back to Tatum's comment about being self-hosted, we just need like a cross-account role. And so we've actually worked with plenty of re resellers where we deploy a very limited role in the payer account. So it doesn't require any additional access or users or anything like that to have to log in. And Kion being the automated solution that it is, can handle that for you. So we've worked with all the big resellers. If there are specific ones that you're interested in, please reach out. We're more than happy to continue that conversation, but no concerns around leveraging it in that way. I think, Tim, the other question that came in tied into what you mentioned around the self-hosted piece. And so
Yep.
when it comes to a variety of different industries, especially highly regulated or just in general, right, folks want to maintain and keep their own data, but also the level of permission needed to sometimes do the things that Tatum described require more things, right? And so from our approach to that is you shouldn't have to rely on the trust or putting some third-party solution that is externally accessing your environment. The networking, the configuration, the infrastructure, anything and everything can be self-contained to do the things that are required within your environment.
Yeah. Awesome. And I appreciate everybody who participated in the poll. No one said that this wasn't applicable to them, so that makes me feel good. But a lot of folks, it's kind of an even split actually around the biggest takeaway. Yeah, so it's about even in terms of the importance of FinOps and Cloud Ops and then ways of approaching policy and automation. Um, so yeah, with that, unless there's any last minute questions that have come in that I missed. Oh, actually, no, okay, same ones. Um, I appreciate everybody being here. Appreciate your time. I know 45 minutes, hour every day is valuable. And so I thank you for being here and look forward to connecting with you all and hearing feedback on today's presentation. And we'll be following up.